You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 Gov.biz Radio, a CBS station.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're tuned to CBS radio station gov.biz, 1580 AM in the Washington, D.C. area, or you're listening to us on the web, WMClive.com, where you can also find links to podcasts of previous shows. A few days after each show, a transcript of the program posts at womensmediacenter.com. And we want to hear from you. Tweet to hashtag WMC Live or call the comment line 347-903-WMC1. Our first guest this week is Adora Svitak, age 14, who'll discuss the Women's Media Center-sponsored Girls' State of the Union and kids' rights in general. Then, since, as you know, Columbus Day is this coming Monday, and though to most Americans it merely means an extra day off and maybe a patriotic parade, we thought we'd do something a little deeper, something from the alternate reality. So we have environmentalist Paula DiPerna to talk about women's centrality to the growing crisis in water scarcity in the U.S. and abroad, and to talk about her novel, Mrs. Columbus. Then the seriously fine Cherokee poet and musician Joy Harjo joins us with a mix of Native American wisdom, politics, and art. Last, Rebecca Adamson, founder of First Peoples Worldwide, takes us to the international level, where indigenous peoples all over are struggling for self-determination. Quite a distinguished assembly. But first, behind the headlines. The Americas that Columbus quote, discovered, were already home to between 72 and 75 million people, a population approximating that of 16th century Europe. North America, Canada, Alaska, and the contiguous United States, was inhabited by roughly 7 million people of more than 1,000 nations, speaking an estimated 400 to 500 distinct languages. The indigenous women of North America, many of whom were sachems or chiefs, wielded authority that was destroyed by the European invasion, which encouraged native men to bargain away land inherited by matrilineal descent and traditionally under women's control. Depending on the nation, women exercised spiritual and secular power. The Navajo and Iroquois in the northeast, and the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Creek in the southeast, those nations were based on clans traced through the female line. There was also respect for lesbian women and gay men, called two-spirited people, thought to possess special spiritual powers. It's true, though, that sentimentalizing early Native American societies does as much a disservice as did the 19th century noble savage stereotype. There were beliefs that women's blood could destroy men's power, so menstruating women had to segregate themselves. Female sexuality apparently scared men, hardly an unusual phenomenon, so some tribes told stories about vaginas with teeth. But powerful female creative archetypes were plentiful. Changing Woman created the Navajo clans. At Laguna Pueblo, Thought Woman created, well, everything by thinking about things and naming them. The Iroquois origin story depicts Sky Woman as the first being. Powers exercised by Iroquois women included owning property, personal and land rights, the rights to forbid male relatives from going to war, to appoint men to chieftainships, and to remove them if they failed their duties under the Great Law of Peace of the Iroquois Confederacy. Iroquois laws addressed resource sharing, the rights of all people, the need for unity, and the centrality of national alliances. These laws, by the way, had a profound influence on the writing of the U.S. Constitution. unfortunately not regarding women's rights, and they were acknowledged as such by the founders. Women's agency eroded under European contact. Smallpox raged and syphilis spread from priests and Spanish soldiers routinely raping Indian women. Death rates in some Catholic missions approached 80%. Children were seized, forcibly locked in boarding schools, forbidden to speak their own languages, sexually and physically abused. Today, there are approximately 450 native nations in the United States. Tribal populations range from over 250,000, Navajo, to less than 100. About 70% of American Indians now live in urban areas. By the 1990s, the infant mortality rate was 3 times greater than the national average. Life expectancy was only 47 years, and rates of alcoholism, sexual assault, HIV/AIDS, and suicide were spiraling well above the national average. But the women have been rising. By 1981, 61 nations had women heads of state, and in 1987, the late Wilma Mankiller was elected principal chief of the vast Cherokee Nation in a historic vote. These women are resurrecting their foremothers' values from 7 generations ago, that all decisions must be weighed by their effect on the 7th generation yet to come. That is what you call thinking ahead. Our next guest is Adora Svitak. She is 14 years old, about to turn 15. She has been called an American child prodigy. She's an internationally published author, known for essays and stories and poems and blogs and stuff. And she has done a full-length novel, which was published in 2011. Lots of things, but for our purposes today, she is the winner of the what was a video contest for the Girls' State of the Union, which is a Women's Media Center project that sheds light on girls as problem solvers and media leaders. Like the President's State of the Union address, the Girls' State of the Union lets girls tell us what our priorities should be. So, welcome to Women's Media Center Live, Adora. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you. It's my honor to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about Girls' State of the Union and what it entails for you.
Well, I was incredibly excited to be able to be a part of the Girls' State of the Union project. Just when I entered the competition and recorded the video, I was excited to see what people's reactions would be, because as a girl who's growing up in the media environment that has definite consequences for us, and going to school, seeing other girls and how they're impacted, I really wanted to say something that would have relevance to us, as well as to adults who would be able to make a difference along with us. So that was why I was personally really interested in undertaking the project.
Well, give us a real short headline, advance headline of what you're going to be saying in the winning address for this contest is featured at a special event at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. So give us just a sample of what you're going to say about the Girls' State of the Union.
Well, in my address, I'd really like to touch upon how girls, I see really sort of a beacon of hope in how we're really speaking up loudly, not being afraid to make our voices heard, whether it's in person, in speeches, on social media. And I think that this is really an amazing new wave of how we can make a difference.
How have you been involved? Do you think you consider yourself an organizer now, sort of? Political organizer?
I guess I would, for sure. Yeah, I've been organizing events, and I've definitely been getting more involved in feminist causes, starting with the Girls' State of the Union for sure, and just starting to talk to my friends, make videos, things like this. So I definitely consider myself an organizer.
You don't feel that there's resistance or confusion on the part of girls? You think girls glom onto it and get it pretty fast?
Well, I recently had a conversation with 4 of my friends, all girls, and I asked, would you consider yourself a feminist? And 2 said yes immediately, and 2 said, well, I'm not really sure. The term has a lot of connotations. And I felt like the fact that 2 of them did say yes for sure and were really clear about it was a good thing. And that as long as we can clear up confusion and make sure that girls are really not afraid to stand up for what they believe in, then we can.
It's a great thing. Yeah, exactly. Although, sometimes people are afraid of the F word, so they say things like, I'm no feminist, but, and then everything that comes out of their mouth after that is feminist. It makes you crazy. Let me ask you.
It does.
Let me ask you something else. When my son was about 8, he and I had a conversation that I then wrote about and tried to begin a campaign about. It didn't get anywhere, but which was the right of children to vote. And I wondered how you felt about that, because the same arguments that are made, I might add, about children not voting, oh, they'll just vote the way their parents do, oh, they're not prepared, oh, they don't know the issues, those same arguments were made about women voting, about people of color voting. And after all, it seems to me children should have a voice in what goes down now, because it sure affects the future. How do you feel about that?
I would definitely agree with that. The speech that launched a lot of my speaking today, my TED Talk in 2010, was all about what adults can learn from kids, and I strongly stand by the idea that we have a lot to teach inherently in our impulsivity and our desire to see really good things happening and to do the right thing. And it reminds me a lot of actually when I was like 6 or 7, my sister and I, we made this declaration of independence from grown-ups, and it was all about how young people could really teach our parents, teach our teachers something. I feel like the right to vote is something that is so key to giving us civic power and to really, I would say, motivating us to take an interest in civic issues, that it would be an amazing thing if it could be extended for definitely a larger number of us.
No, we should try to revive that campaign, because it's a consciousness raiser even when people argue against it. It makes you realize how baseless the prejudice is. Because,
yes.
I remember one argument was, oh, well, you give a child a lollipop and she or he will vote whichever way you want. Well, the same argument was made, oh, well, you offer a woman a pretty ribbon for her hair and she'll vote the way her husband wants. I mean, it's amazing. It's the same primer that they've read and they keep recycling it. Tell me what's next for you. You're about to be 15. Next? Yeah.
Of course, I'm really looking forward to the address in Washington, D.C. for the Girls' State of the Union. That's immediately on the frontier, I guess. But I'm also working on a book project on adolescence, kind of redefining I know that I'm known as a child prodigy, for instance, and a lot of people know me as the 12-year-old in the TED Talk, but really what it means to be growing up. And I think that would be an interesting anthology. I've been working on that over winter break, and I'm hoping to start applying at some point in the near future as well.
Okay, well, we have to go, but I want to say this to you and say it to you on air so it's a public pledge. I was a child prodigy, so as one to another, I will say that if you ever need to talk to somebody about growing up and growing into yourself as an adult, mature, wonderful person, not that I am, but I'm trying, find me and I'll be of any support that I can be to you.
Thank you so much. It means a lot.
It's time to take a short break. Meanwhile, tell us what you're thinking. Call our comment line at 347-903-WMC1. This is Women's Media Center Live, the talk show with a brain. I'm Robin Morgan. Verbal Karate is coming up next. And our next guest is the environmentalist Paula DiPerna on solutions to water scarcity. Clue: women are central. So stay tuned. Join Carol Jenkins, founding president of the Women's Media Center, for an October 19th conversation about media struggles with race, class, gender, faith, and politics. Jody Evans, chair of the WMC board, Amy Allison, co-executive director of Roots Action, and Rose Aguilar, host of Your Call on KALW 91.7 FM, join Jenkins at the Bioneers Conference in San Rafael, California. For more information and tickets, visit conference.bioneersgroup.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 gov.biz radio, a CBS station.
Paula DiPerna is a widely published author and a public policy analyst and consultant to nonprofits and a feminist environmentalist. She served as a consultant on environmental matters to the World Bank and the Global Environment Facility. She traveled extensively around the world when she was writer, co-producer, and vice president for international affairs for the Cousteau Society, and working with Jacques Cousteau. She has been the president and vice president of the Chicago Climate Exchange, and she is a novelist. And Paula, let's start with the novelist part. You wrote a novel on Mrs. Columbus.
Well, since it's the ostensible Columbus Day, that's probably a nice thing to refer to, and it ties back to environmentalism in the sense that I was with Cousteau in Cuba, which was quite beautiful some years ago, reading what was nominally described as Christopher Columbus's journal, and it seemed to me that he had this obsessive need to be sailing along, naming places and moving on to the next place, which was part of the sort of acquisition mentality at the time. Kind of collecting islands, collecting places, and as we know, of course, collecting people and all kinds of riches. And I was sitting in this part of the Caribbean, which indeed Columbus had named the archipelago of the Queen. And in his book, he simply said, it's not his journal, I arrived today at a group of islands, I named them the archipelago of the Queen. Tomorrow I'm going to do X and Y. And I thought, my goodness, these places, these islands are so beautiful. They're absolutely magnificent, little green, wonderful mangrove islands with these perfectly gorgeous white, small beaches here and there, and he was simply moving on. And I thought, I wonder if he'd had a woman on board, what she might have said about the archipelago of the Queen. And I thought, okay, that's a book idea. So I created a fictional character, rather I fictionalized the facts, which were he had been married to a Portuguese lady named Filipa, and I fictionalized the rest. So she actually went on the trip in the novel, and of course the world that she discovered, so-called discovered, was quite different than the one that he did. And I had great fun writing it, but it really changed my view of historical research because it was just fascinating and quite fun to find out who she really had been and what might have been.
But the interesting,
which, of course, is the difference between history and herstory.
Yeah. You also just said that you discovered that the planet does not come free.
Right. You learn when you travel, we all learn this, I think, how easy it is to treat everything around sort of like an all-you-can-eat buffet. And one of the dilemmas that I've come up against over the years is one starts out thinking that one just has to protect environmental resources, but the key to protecting them, really, I've decided, is not just actually protecting them, but valuing them in an entirely new way, meaning to try to wrestle with this sort of psychological, moral, and philosophical, even potentially existential dilemma, which is how do you price the priceless? How do you put a price on something which is unique and rare and scarce, and as far as we know, the only planet we have, which does come free in the sense that you're born into it, but then as soon as you're born into it, you have responsibilities, and there will be forces acting upon you that are acting as if the world were free, and that when the water was free to waste, and air and energy and all of these things, trees, forests, insects, all of these creatures are just ours to use as we wish.
You mentioned water, and one of the things that has fascinated me about your work is that it's embodied by the 3 W's, work, water, and women, and the centrality of women to what is the mounting crisis of water scarcity, and in fact the centrality of women to saving the planet. So say some things about that.
Well, the 3 W's, again, Occam's razor suggests that if there's a complicated problem, you should simplify it. Probably the simplest approach is the best one. And so I try to simplify all of these complicated environmental issues down to the 3 W's, work, women, and water. Work meaning, obviously, labor, and that if we organized ourselves around the principle that confronting environmental degradation is the greatest jobs program, the greatest livelihood protector we could ever have imagined, and put that central, the idea of creating meaningful work for people and employment in the new areas of environmental technology, environmental efficiency, etc., that would be a great mobilizer and ought to be politically palatable in any political context. Water, most people don't realize there'll never be another drop of it on Earth. We have seen all the water we're ever going to see, and indeed climate change is really mostly manifesting itself in the movement of water, either in cloud movement and in tremendous torrential rainstorms in some places, horrible droughts in others. And of course, in many countries, including developed, but most especially in so-called developing countries, women are the ones who go out every day and try to find water. We're
the water haulers of the world, yeah.
I just saw a great statistic, not so great, but an interesting one. 150 million hours of work, of time by women and girls is consumed in one day going after water. I mean, which it's hard to imagine what that is equivalent to, but it sounds like a lot of time. And it's not time put to good use. It's not productive time. So if we, again, organized our economies around cleaning up the water, avoiding waste of water, taking care of water, that by itself would pull together all kinds of interest and strands of effort to incorporate almost every other component of the economy. I mean, it's much more than a plumbing system, literally, but it is literally a better plumbing system when you consider waste of water in the consuming countries, and of course scarcity of water in the poorer countries. If we figured out a way to make the scarcity less scarce and the waste less wasteful, that would be a phenomenal organizing principle. And then, of course, women are central to not only both, but everything else, because we just seem to be in the vanguard. Have always been in the vanguard in environmental economics for sure. And interestingly today, to use a term I don't much like, called sustainable investing or impact investing, to go back to the price on the price list, there is a lot of money in the world, and it's floating around, going into greedy pockets for the most part. But if capital could be mobilized to put a value on the scarcity of resources and on the priceless resources, it would change the way capital flows. There'd be much more money going into projects that we might consider to be productive and healthy for the planet, not to mention for people.
Interesting, because later on in the program, Rebecca Adamson will be with us, and I know that that's one of her focuses, is trying to humanize investment or planetize, environmentalize, I don't know what the verb is, but make more sane investment in precisely those areas, which requires shifting the paradigm. Paula, we've only got another minute. Is there some lasting wisdom that you could leave with our listeners about what individual women can do toward leaving a less heavy climate footprint, or any environmental tips?
Well, I think in a political context, it's certainly to only vote for candidates who understand the complexities of environmental issues and see them as economic issues. The second thing would be to run for office. I'm a very big advocate of women running for office, even if it's unlikely that she'll win. There's nothing, you can't really understand the way the world works, certainly not in the United States, without having once tried some kind of political office. And just to return to that investment point, I think any women who have money or who know people who have money or think about money, to put this question in the air: what work is my money doing for me, and who is advising whom? And just to echo what Rebecca might say, it's interesting that in the mainstream investing world, apparently women advisors are much more likely to advise their clients to take up sustainable investing by almost a 2-to-1 margin. So women are in the vanguard, and if we remain in the vanguard in both politics and in investing and in our own personal sort of scrutiny of these issues, I think we can really move the world and lift the anchor, as Mrs. Columbus might say.
Thank you. That's terrific. Thanks so much for being with us, and keep on doing the wonderful work you're doing.
Thank you, Robin, and you too. I've enjoyed it.
And now for Verbal Karate. Many of the words spotlighted here are based on the anti-racist, anti-sexist language books of Rosalie Maggio, who is currently collaborating with the Women's Media Center on a new book to be called Unspinning the Spin. So the verbal karate chops for today are two phrases, free market and free trade. Well, I mean, really, who doesn't like the word free? But it's been overused, misused, abused, and ill-used. Free market sounds like something we would like, but it's deceptive. It means, of course, freeing businesses from regulations and from controls against poisons and pollution. It glamorizes privatization, deregulation, and the famous less government. Actually, it means less responsible government. Letting HMOs and drug companies, for instance, decide what type of medical care people will have and how much it will cost. Not responsible. Moreover, the free market is a fairy tale. Look at the bailout of the airlines after 9/11 to the bill of $15 billion. Look at the shoring up of the banking and mortgage industry, the car industry. When government aid is needed by business, why, then it's just fine, it's okay. But whenever there's government concern on behalf of the environment, consumers, or working people, conservatives wave their free market banner. Free trade is the next phrase, which means, of course, trade between or within countries unrestricted by legislation, taxes, or other barriers is called free trade. Bill Moyers has talked about the social costs of so-called free trade. Quote, "For over a decade, free trade has hovered over the political system like a biblical commandment, striking down anything, trade unions, the environment, indigenous rights, even the constitutional standing of our own laws passed by our own elected representatives, anything that gets in the way of unbridled greed. The broader negative consequence of this agenda, well documented by scholars, gets virtually no attention in the dominant media. Instead of reality, we get optimistic multicultural scenarios of coordinated global growth. Instead of debate, we get a stark choice between free trade to help the world and gloomy-sounding protectionism that will set everybody back." Close quote. So, don't be seduced by the word free. The phrases free market and free trade are about as much misnomers as is the inane, redundant, highly popular phrase in commercials, free gift. Drives me crazy. And the verbal karate kick this week is a favorite quote of mine from the book The Creation of Patriarchy by the great historian Gerda Lerner. It's about stepping outside of patriarchal thought. And here's the quote. "Being skeptical toward every known system of thought, being critical of all assumptions, developing intellectual courage, the challenge to move from the desire for safety and approval to the most unfeminine quality of all, intellectual arrogance, the supreme hubris which asserts to itself the right to reorder the world." We'll take another pause here, during which you can tweet us at hashtag WMC Live. We'll return with our version of Columbus Day, the vision, politics, and art of Cherokee poet Joy Harjo. This is Robin Morgan on Women's Media Center Live, and we'll be back in just a moment. A treat for those in the nation's capital. On October 25th, the Women's Media Center will honor the work and life of journalist Molly Ivins at the arena stage production of Red Hot Patriot, starring Kathleen Turner. Turner joins WMC board member Gloria Felt at a special post-play reception for the Women's Media Center. For tickets, email redhotpatriot@womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 gov.biz radio, a CBS station.
Our next guest is Joy Harjo, who is a poet, the first sister poet that I've been able to welcome to Women's Media Center Live, and as a poet that gives me great joy. Well, literally great joy. She's also a musician and an author. She has played a formidable role in what's been called the second wave of the Native American Renaissance. She's a member of the Muscogee Creek Nation and of Cherokee descent. Many awards, the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Native Writers Circle of the Americas, the Penn Open Book Award, but mostly a musician, a poet, an organizer, a visionary. Oh, Joy, welcome to Women's Media Center Live, and thank you for being with us.
Yeah, I'm glad I could be here, and it's nice to hear your voice after so long. I haven't talked to you in a long time.
I know. We're busy saving the world, Joy, and sometimes there's not enough time for saving ourselves and each other. Before I forget, I want to talk about the memoir that you just published, Crazy Brave, because it's wonderful, and talk about it.
Yes, this memoir just came out from Norton, and it's a memoir that took me 14 years to write. It begins when the releaser of Soul. It begins with a vision I had, actually, in which I was taken out, way out, and so I could really see the earth and saw the connection and how we're in a huge story matrix of so many levels. And I saw how all the stories are connected. So in a sense, my memoir is like waves of stories that begin when the releaser of souls sends me, when I come to this earth, to my particular parents and to my particular generation, and ends at the point where I've basically had kind of a breakdown, but I didn't have the luxury of a breakdown because I was a mother with 2 children and they depended on me, so I had to keep going. And it was at that time that poetry, the spirit of poetry, came to me, and that's when I was in my very early 20s. I wanted to write about the 70s, the 80s, and everything going on then, and to write about more glamorous kinds of things. But the reason it took me 14 years is because I kept running away from this book which goes to the crucible of childhood and the crucible of coming into consciousness in a world in which our lands have been stolen, in a world in which there was great change, with my generation and our generation, and yet, there was a great cost. Everything always costs something, and yet great gifts came out of it too.
So this is a book from a very deep place.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it was, somebody asked me recently, said, how do you feel with this being out in the world? And because it is very revealing, and even as public as I am, I'm a very private person, but the story wanted to be told.
Stories are everything, aren't they? I mean, they're the stuff of life. The novel I just finished is all about stories and storytelling. And the older I get, the more I realize that's it. I mean, there's no meaning except in narrative, in our stories. And of course, native peoples have always known that. But for those of us who were not born indigenous, it's been a learning process.
Well, I think if you look at all cultures have indigenous roots. I mean, in
sure.
Roots that go back to storytelling, and in roots where poetry doesn't exist in books necessarily, but it's considered a living being. Although poetry in books is living, it's just another form. And I love books, but it exists with poetry and music and dance are very close together. In fact, they get lonely when they're not together.
Yes. And so that you are a musician as well. When you perform, do you do a mix of the poetry? I haven't seen you in too many years. A mix of the poetry and the music, or straight poetry? Yes,
you
do.
Usually, even if I do a keynote, I'm often mixing music in too.
That I remember.
It's kind of a weave. It's a weave, and yet I like to just play hardcore music. I had a great gig recently at the New Mexico Jazz Workshop with some great musicians, and invited Cornelius Eady to play with me.
Wow.
To sing. So it takes a lot of forms, but the poetry is never far away from music.
Yeah, it's the bedrock, isn't it? The poetry. I mean, I've often thought that if I had to be in a situation where I couldn't write fiction again, or I couldn't write nonfiction political books again, I would be cranky, but I could live with that. But if somebody told me that I would never write another poem, I think I would find it a contradiction to be on this planet, in this skin. Can't imagine.
It's soul talk. Yeah, it's soul talk, and it's soul food in a way that, stories. One time I was thinking, well, what use are human beings in this biosphere? Do we serve any purpose at all?
We tell
we
stories.
Have to ask ourselves.
But we tell stories.
Yes, and that's what we do. We make the connections, and we tell. That's what we do from the time we, even at night while we think we're sleeping, we're gathering stories, and then texting is part of story gathering. Writing, telephones. Cell phones, etc.
Well, speaking of stories and poems, would you help us celebrate the un-Columbus Day that we're having by turning it on its head, by giving us a poem or a piece of writing?
I think this one would be the best. It's called Rabbit is Up to Tricks. This is the best one. When you say turning it on its head, this is the best one for that.
All right.
And Rabbit is the trickster figure in my tribe. And this is a contemporary trickster story, but told in kind of the older manner. And it heads up. It was the opening for a play I did called Wings of Night Sky, Wings of Morning Light. And it also appears in Crazy Brave. In a world long before this one, there was enough for everyone until somebody got out of line. We heard it was Rabbit, fooling around with clay in the wind. Everybody was tired of his tricks and no one would play with him, and he was lonely in this world. So Rabbit thought to make a person. And when he blew into the mouth of that crude figure to see what would happen, the clay man stood up. Rabbit showed the clay man how to steal a chicken. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal corn. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal someone else's wife, and that clay man obeyed. Rabbit felt important and powerful, and Clayman felt important and powerful, and once that Clayman started, he could not stop. Once he took that chicken, he wanted all the chickens. Once he took that corn, he wanted all the corn. And once he took that wife, he wanted all the wives. He was insatiable. Then he had a taste of gold, and he wanted all the gold. Then it was land and anything else he saw. His wanting only made him want more. Soon it was countries, then it was trade. The wanting infected the earth. We lost track of the purpose and meaning for life. We began to forget our songs. We forgot our stories. We could no longer see or hear our ancestors or talk with each other across the kitchen table. Now, Rabbit couldn't find a drink of fresh water. Forests were being mowed down all over the world to make more. And Rabbit had no place to play. Rabbit's trick had backfired. Rabbit tried to call the Clayman back, but when the Clayman wouldn't listen, Rabbit realized he'd made a Clayman with no ears.
Oh, that's a wonderful one. You're very aptly named, I must say.
I've had to grow into it. I'm kind of crabby naturally.
Well, it wouldn't be, but it wouldn't be worth it if you had just, fallen into it. Then you'd be a Hallmark card. No, I mean,
yeah, I guess so. And
growing into it means you've really earned it. What is coming up for you? Are you going to be gigging around? Are you starting a new book? We've got a minute or two left, so tell us what lies ahead.
Actually, I'm working on I get a commission for a play script at the Public Theater for a story that will reinstate Native people, particularly Southeastern Native people, to the stories of the origins of blues and jazz.
Wonderful! Oh my God, that's fascinating. The origins of blues and jazz.
Yes, we've been left out of the story, and yet we were there.
Oh, that's so cool. And when eagerly, greedily, I say, you haven't written it yet, but when...
No, right now I'm researching. I'm researching in all kinds of corners.
So it'll be a while.
And, yeah, but I plan to, we may have like a kind of reading of it, certainly by the fall.
In New York?
Yes, in New York.
Will you promise to let me know so I can be there with all ears, unlike Clayman?
Yes.
Oh, Joy, thank you so much for being with us. This has been really exactly what I would hope it had been. I mean, to take a Columbus Day. And I think we should rename Columbus Day First Peoples Worldwide Day.
Or something like that.
Reclaim it from conquest and make it, just shift the weight and the gravity to what was really important and what could save the planet with utterly different values.
Well, there have been moves to do that, but so far, people really cling to Columbus Day. So.
Yeah, well, because they like patriotism and parades. We'll just have to give them better parades and moderate the make it matriotism or something.
That sounds good to me.
Along with the matrilineal line. Thank you, and much love to you and in your work, and I will be watching for the new play. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us, Joy. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
We'll take one more break here. I'm Robin Morgan, and you're listening to Women's Media Center Live, the talk show with a brain. We'll return in just a moment with Rebecca Adamson on Indigenous peoples around the world. So don't go away. Mark your calendars. On November 13, the WMC Women's Media Awards will celebrate 5 journalists for their contributions. The recipients are Pat Mitchell, President and CEO of the Paley Center for Media, Martha Nelson, Editorial Director of Time Inc., Laura Ling, Correspondent for Current TV and Vice President of Vanguard Journalism Unit, Lisa Ling, host of Oprah Winfrey Network's Our America with Lisa Ling, and Sarah Hoy, all-platform journalist at CNN. To buy tickets and sponsorships to the Women's Media Awards in New York, contact Media Awards at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 gov.biz radio, a CBS station.
next guest is Rebecca Adamson, who is the founder and president of First Peoples Worldwide. Rebecca is a Cherokee economist. She's a leader, an activist, a groundbreaking indigenous woman. She has been involved with First Nations Development Institute, which she started in 1980, and now First Peoples Worldwide in 1997. She co-authored The Color of Wealth, published in 2006. It goes on, but I want to get right to her and her wisdom and her smarts. Rebecca, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Oh, thank you, Robin. It's just an honor and a privilege to be talking with you and have your people listening to the conversation.
Well, you have been that anomaly, a feminist Cherokee economist, and I think among the things that is so exciting is that you've developed business models based on indigenous economic models that are both good for people, good for the planet, and practical. And they go against the conventional patriarchal wisdom that says either something is idealistic or it's good for the economy, but not both, that bifurcated thinking. So talk to us about that.
Well, I think it started pretty early in my career. I wasn't an economist in the beginning. I majored in philosophy, and then I went back and got my master's in economics because my early work was with the Indian-controlled school movement, and it was basically our civil rights movement. It was in the 1960s and 70s when across the country, Indian reservations, parents on the reservations were really fighting for the right to have a say in their children's future into the school system, into the teachers, which was a right given to everyone else. The parent teacher associations, the school boards were open for parents, but not for Indian parents. And so within that early work, I was fortunate to be under some of the best, incredible Indian leadership of the century, I think, in the 90s. And what I learned was about self-determination, and it culminated in a law called the Indian Education Self-Determination Act in 1975, which gave the right for indigenous peoples to run their own programs. But what I ran into after that law was passed was the implementation and how the sovereignty is not a federal program. So the fact that we could contract with the government didn't mean we really still controlled our own destiny, which led me to economics. And the economics then of that day was just one model and one model only. And it had an overlay of values that didn't fit our culture. When a people value community, when people value family, when people value nature, there was no way in the economic system to reflect that value. The only value forest had was if you chopped it down and was on its way to market. Right. And so I had to really, for about 10 years, working with grassroots communities on economic development, come up with an alternative that really looked at the paradigm of economics, the goals behind economics. If you see economics as scarcity of resources and a bunch of individuals with insatiable appetites, you design a system for accumulation and competition, which is what we have. Yeah. We have a few people getting very, very rich. In fact, we have 496 multi-billionaires that own collectively over 34% of the entire world's assets and more than 90-some of the developing countries' GDP is reflected in the 494 billionaires.
Oh, it makes you crazy.
This system is about accumulation. It's about a few people getting to the top, and it will create scarcity. And when I looked at the indigenous way of thinking this through, we saw paradigms of prosperity of creation. Sure, we may run out of fossil fuel, but we have wind, we have solar. Mm-hmm. I also saw an understanding of, first and foremost, kinship. And then within that kinship system, you actually could reach and attain enough, where there was times when you really had enough. And it was designed for sharing and for cooperation. And the two systems are at odds. And so my career has been really trying to actually bridge and keep our way and subsistence economy alive while bringing it into the capital system so that we can really change this. I mean, capitalism can work, but it needs values.
Well, you've been an amazing bridge, because I was just looking at my notes here, and you convinced the World Bank to create the first global Indigenous Peoples Facility Fund to make small building grants. You created the Lumba Aboriginal Community Foundation in Australia, letting the Sans tribe secure traditional homelands in Botswana, Namibia. You launched a strategy that includes a lot of multinationals, the big baddies, supposedly, like Alcoa and Texaco and, and so forth, with investment criteria that protects the rights of Indigenous peoples and has been adopted by a mutual fund and an index fund. You must be extraordinarily persuasive.
I think it's inherent in our nature to do the right thing. I think it's just ridiculous. I think there's a gene inside each one of us that wants to actually share, a gene inside each one of us that wants to do the right thing. And one case in point, we're looking at indigenous design principles for how subsistence economies were created and organized for the widest distribution of wealth. I had the good luck to serve and still serve on a board of a mutual fund, the Calvert Social Investment Funds. And when I approached them about lending to low-income loan funds and creating an actual asset class, they were eager. No one had done this before. And we surveyed our shareholders unanimously across the board, Robin. All of our shareholders said, go for it. We wouldn't mind having a little bit less return. We want our principal intact, but we want to invest in what they said. We want to invest in poor people. And we created what's called community notes, which is today about a $4.5 billion asset class where individual investors, institutional investors can invest in community notes, which will go directly into low-income loan funds, microcredit, community credit unions, community development banks. So it was really looking at, we can make an economy that is about people. We can make an economy that is about prosperity for all. These things can be done, and I think what we're struggling with is, well, your show and point, there's very few of none other than your show on the air. We need a media that covers the kinds of models that are out there that can give us roadmaps.
That's what Women's Media Center is trying to do, not only on radio but in all media, and to wake us up. Because I remember the first time I heard the native concept of 7 generations, and that keeping in mind that what we do now affects us 7 generations into the future, and it totally blew me away, because of course we're raised in Western culture to not even think maybe 1 generation, And I then wondered, what do these extremely wealthy mega millionaires and titans, do they not think their grandchildren are going to need to breathe air and drink clean water? I mean, so does it not come home to them at some point? And clearly what you're doing is tapping something even in them that begins to realize that. And that's so hopeful. I mean, it's the word enough is so hopeful in that context.
Well, I used to teach a graduate program in Indigenous economics, and we would do the 2 economic paradigms, and I'd get to the one of, it's a kinship sense based of enoughness, and people would go, well, enoughness isn't a word.
Oh, yeah, it's a word. It's a word.
I was like, okay, but hold that concept.
Well, we've got to go, but unfortunately, we've had enoughness, but not enoughness of you ever. Thank you for everything you're doing, and we'll be watching and following in the lead of you and Indigenous peoples. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you, Robin. Bye-bye.
And now it's time for Fighting Words. Recently, we've had to endure the expectable. Rush Limbaugh having a spittle-spewing, Cro-Magnon-worthy Ugamug meltdown over hearing that men's penises are shrinking. You guessed it, it's a plot. The feminazis put something in the water. They've been conspiring to shrivel male members to the size Rush and men like him always feared theirs were, despite centuries of women trying to explain size really isn't the point, Herman. But to understand that, those men concerned would have to learn something about female anatomy, and Todd Akin is not the only one who is not about to do that. But now there's insult added to this injury, and by a woman who should know better, who's written a book called The End of Men. It's sort of the pseudo-intellectuals' version of Russia's wee weenie panic. But it's being taken seriously, at least by those people perpetually ready to entertain the idea that 1, feminism is dead because it failed, or 2, feminism is dead because it succeeded. That is, it's not necessary since American women have it so good. This book is in the second category, a soothing comfort to any bitter guy positive that affirmative action is responsible for why his life is ruined. Maybe Hannah Rosen, the author, was seduced by sensationalistic bestseller fantasies, but that's no excuse for implying that American women have it made, right when our basic human right to reproductive freedom is under massive assault. Fortunately, her argument is decimated elegantly, factually, and thoroughly by Stephanie Kuntz in the September 30th New York Times Sunday Review section. If you haven't seen it, you can find the article online. It's called The Myth of Male Decline. And read it and equip yourself with solid research. Bulletin. Gentlemen, not to worry. You are still entrenched in power, and U.S. women's progress has stalled or even moved backwards in some areas. Since Kuntz did such a fine job, citing all the categories, facts, and figures, I don't have to. But she didn't cover media. So here is some data from the Women's Media Center 2012 Status of Women in Media report. Look, I know for some of you listening it's Saturday morning, but still, you might want to pour yourself a glass of wine or something stronger. 71.6% of all TV news directors are men. 81.9% of all radio news directors are men. 78% of the local radio news force are men. 87% of the 2011 Heavy 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America are men. 87%. 74% of news sources on NPR are men. 78% of guests on Sunday news talk shows, NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, and Fox News, men. 92.2% of all TV sports anchor positions, men. 88.6% of all sports editors, men. 90% of all sports columnists, men. Well, I could go on, but you get the point. Don't we just have it made, we women? All those poor guys oppressed by our power-mad, mercilessly ambitious ascent. Women control everything, from penis size to the media. We won. I must have been in the shower when it happened. Time's up for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS station 1580 gov.biz AM radio in Washington, D.C., and on the web at WMClive.com, where you can also find podcasts of previous shows. A few days after each program, a transcript posts at womensmediacenter.com. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program, Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams-Chancellor, Technical Director Michelle Kinsey-Bruns, and Production Assistant Nora Eakin. Thanks for joining the conversation. I'm Robin Morgan, suggesting that when faced with a difficult situation, you ask yourself the three questions the Hopi people ask. What are the goals? What are the tools? What are the obstacles? Pretty wise, eh? And I hope you'll join us next Saturday at 11 a.m. here at Women's Media Center Live.
Women's Media Center Live is brought to you by Regina Kulik Scully, our founding sponsor. You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 gov.biz radio, a CBS station.